All right. I'm going to welcome everyone to the Public Safety Appropriations Subcommittee, and we've got a few items to go over this agenda. We've had some very long afternoons. I anticipate that we'll probably have some additional long afternoons, but I don't want to waste members' time, and they'll be coming. Some people have bills to present. So we'll go ahead and start taking information. We're going to have members that are coming in that had some lunch meetings with constituents and a couple of bills in the committee. So they're going to probably be trickling in during the presentations, and I ask for your pardons over that. And with that, I'd like to go ahead and start off with you're going to present?
Yes, sir.
Neil is not going to come and present?
No, sir. He actually, him and his wife have a personal matter they're having to take care of today, so he was unable to be here, and he sends his apologies from
Let me turn that on. Okay, you said. Well, thank you, and I'm sorry. I hope things work out.
Yeah, everything's
for the
fine.
Commissioner, and everything goes well with him. But we're going to go to the Department of Community Supervision, and we will turn to section 18 of your track sheet, and we'll start off there. If you're following in your big budget book, that's page 135. And we appreciate the Commission being here. We appreciate the service of your men and women, your department. And I'm going to let you go ahead and present the budget. Now, I know I've got your presentation here, and I'm happy for you to extol the virtues of the department. But we have some significant alterations in your previous year's budget to this year's budget, plus looking at the amended. So I do want to spend most of our time on that.
Okay.
And so that we have time for questions from me or Chairman Green.
Yes, sir.
And whoever else meanders in, like Chairman Powell.
So I know that you are very familiar with Department of Community Supervision and the large number of individuals under supervision with our department, as well as the fact that we lead the nation with the highest caseloads, as well as length of sentence while under supervision. So I won't spend a lot of time going over that. I will say that as far as our budget reduction plan goes, we really focused on three areas: operational efficiencies, strategic workforce management, and evidence-based decision-making. And we did that while keeping in mind that our statutory obligations as an agency. So if we move to, we'll go to, and I'm sorry, mine does not have page numbers on it, but the next slide is just a brief summary of the
Budget reductions?
Budget reduction summary, yes, sir.
Yeah, good.
Amended year fiscal year 2020, those reduction amounts are reflected there in those four areas of focus for the agency. And then the next slide, focus areas of reduction. Just very briefly, under operational efficiencies, what we targeted was reducing office supplies and travel, as well as reducing physical footprint by emphasizing a distributed work model. Renegotiate contracts where feasible. Our second target area was strategic workforce management. Create centralized position pool and staffing allocation model, as well as shift from a case count to a time-based supervision model. And then lastly, under evidence-based decision-making, eliminate all of our non-statutory functions and consolidate internal and external duplicative functions.
Okay, so let's talk about the freezing of your vacant positions. Looking at line 18.1.2 in the amended budget, there are 4 vacant positions that are being frozen. Is that correct?
Under administration, yes, sir. There are four positions that are being frozen for a total of $254,000.
I'm sorry. Yeah, it's section 18, page 7, and of both of the budget track sheets. So now we're looking at this here. What I want to go over with you is the number of vacant positions of those that you're freezing, the 4 that you're freezing, which means there won't be any funding for those positions should anybody become available to hire. And,
yes, sir.
And with those 4, how long have those been vacant positions?
Those positions have been vacant for probably an average of 6 months.
Okay. And how many additional vacant positions do you have in administration?
That is all of them.
That's all of them? Okay.
Yes, sir.
And so for what reason can you explain to the committee why those have not been filled?
So In relation to all four of those positions, these are positions that through process improvement as well as eliminating some duplicative services, when we initially got the budget reduction, we targeted those four positions as positions that we could freeze and not rehire and be able to continue the same service delivery as we have in the past within the administrative budget.
Okay. On field services, we have the same thing at line 18.2.3. We have a freezing of vacant positions for $4.3 million.
Yes, sir.
So explain to me how many positions we're talking about.
So that is a total of 76 positions. 26 of those positions are community supervision officer positions for $1.6 million, and then the other 50 are non-sworn positions. We currently have 44 vacancies that we're, in addition to those that we're holding, 44 vacancies that we are in the process of hiring.
And when you say process of hiring, what does that mean?
So they are anywhere from probably vacancies that we've realized in the past 30 days to a couple of them are probably 60, and I think maybe one or two of them are a little bit above 60 days, but they're in the process of being hired. So most of them have been posted. We're in the hiring process, and the majority of those are sworn positions.
And then you said the 50, I didn't catch what kind of positions those are.
Those are all, 50 of those, the total is of 76 positions in field services. 50 of them are administrative positions. The bulk of those would be admin staff. Mm-hmm. Some of them are counseling positions, and then 26 of them are community supervision officer positions that are being frozen.
Are these counseling positions that we had allocated before to assist with, and we were transitioning, I think, some of the administrative assistants back in sort of a quasi-field role, and since they were with the court systems, providing on-site counseling and
so those you're referring to the appropriation last year for the court specialist positions?
That's correct.
Are not included in those positions. Because those court specialist positions have been extremely key in allowing us to move 49 positions that were in court, working court, back into the field to supervise caseload. So those 49 positions are now actually working a caseload, supervising the caseload, working in the field as a CSO, okay. As well as the fact that those positions are taking a lot of the administrative functions that previously were tying up officers' time in court. They're no longer having to spend that time in court because those court specialists are taking over that function. So they can dedicate their time to the field supervision.
Okay. And have those 49 positions been filled?
Yes, sir.
Because they were administrative staff that were moving to the field, or counseling that were moving to the field, right?
Correct.
Okay, good. All right, let's make sure we're holding the line on that, on last year's decision to authorize that change.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and then you have, you're transferring 11 community supervision officers at line 18.2.6, and that's going to go down to field, is it going to field services, or how's that moving? I'm sorry, yeah. So every one of those positions has been transferred to a full-time CSO position. So we eliminated the MORE program. We eliminated the officers in the transitional centers. They no longer work in the transitional centers as part of the MORE program. Mm-hmm. Those officers are now working in the field, okay. Carrying a caseload. And all 11 of those positions have been transferred. They have. Now, if I recall correctly, was it about 30 positions total that we created to assist with helping the folks in transition to find housing, work placement, and then some miscellaneous assistance. And I'm ballparking that.
Those are the Georgia Prison Reentry Initiative positions that have been associated with that pilot project. And so, yes, there's a total of 35 of those positions that we're currently eliminating as part of the reduction.
So you're eliminating all 35 that we had allocated 2 years ago, I think it was?
So it's been, over the course of several sessions, we've allocated, so that it started off as a pilot, and then we expanded to 17 sites. Last year, our initial ask was for 20 positions. We were funded for 10. Okay. And so those 35 positions, yes, they're all being eliminated. Now, that does not necessarily mean that the prison reentry model is not still part of our supervision plan. So we have 17, the original 17 pilot sites are still in existence. We have community coordinators at each one of those sites that are taking on the responsibilities of some of the in-reach coordinators as well as housing coordinators. And so they're still able to deliver the services that were associated with the success of the prison reentry initiative. I mean, those 17 pilot sites. What we are not doing is expanding to the additional 5 sites that we asked for appropriation for last year, and then eliminating 5 housing coordinators, 3 faith and justice positions, 19 in-reach positions, 3 admin positions, and then the expansion of the 5 that were funded last year. However, those people that are on those...
Could you repeat that one more time?
All the positions?
Those lists.
So it's 5 housing coordinators, 3 faith and justice positions, 19 in-reach positions, and so those were the positions that were actually in the prison systems working inside the wire. 3 admin positions, and then the 5 community coordinators that were part of the appropriation last year for expansion.
Okay.
However, those people, their positions are not necessarily being eliminated. They're being allowed to apply for vacant either CSO or counselor positions. And so currently, we have 11 that are still on their position. We've given them until March to find a position within the agency that is funded that they can apply for, or if they determine they would rather leave the agency. And there has been a few that have left the agency, but the majority of them have applied for either a CSO position or a vacant counselor position and been hired on those positions because they are funded.
Is that an administrative directive that Commissioner Nail has put forward, or is that being directed by somebody else?
Commissioner Nail, yes, sir.
Okay. And in doing that, what is the thinking in terms of the impact for helping people transition into society from prison? What impact do we think that this is going to have in terms of the success rate of those making that transition and not recidivating back into the prison system and becoming another, additional burden on the citizens of the state?
And that's an excellent question. If you remember correctly, last year, as part of our proposal, we submitted an evaluation that Applied Research Services did. That evaluation showed that there overall in the pilot sites, there was a 14% reduction in recidivism. That was as a whole. They took all those different positions into account. But if you looked specifically at each position individually, the one position that had the biggest impact were the community coordinators. If you back up to where the Prison Reentry Initiative model initiated with the Criminal Justice Reform Council, the initial model called for an in-reach coordinator, a community coordinator, and a housing coordinator at each one of the pilot sites.
Right.
Over time, some of the functions of, for example, of a housing coordinator, establishing housing relationships, building capacity within the community, those functions over time started to go away, and the community coordinator is able to absorb those functions. We have a great working relationship with DCA as part of our reentry partnership housing. They continue to build capacity as far as housing goes across the state for our offenders. So we feel very strongly that even with the elimination of these positions, those community coordinators that are still in place in the 17 pilot sites will be able to continue the service continuity that they previously had delivered, and that resulted in a 14% reduction in recidivism. And in reference to the in-reach coordinators, they were positioned in the prisons. And I'm glad to see Department of Corrections here today. We've had conversations with Commissioner Ward about the fact that they have reentry counselors in the prison system. And one of their main functions and goals is to work to prepare those offenders that are releasing from prison into the community to make sure that the resources that they need are available in those communities. So we still have 3 positions dedicated to making sure that that handoff between prison and community is still there.
Okay. And then, so part of this is once you start to develop the housing, the system and the knowledge of where housing is available and how that turnover may be addressed with inmates that have come out and they're in transition and they're moving back out, and they may keep that place and may move some other location. Once you've kind of established that, that's a known marketplace, and it really is the first year or 2 that you have to build that up within each one of these centers, and then after that, you pretty much know where those houses are, the housing availability is, and you know where the units are, you know who to contact to help facilitate that transition. Is that fair
right?
to
So
say?
the capacity building component of each one of those pilot sites starts to diminish over time when we talk about housing, because you have established housing partnerships
Is
within
that also
community.
true with workplace? Because that was also a part of this initiative, was to also help find meaningful work for the inmates as they come out.
And that was one of the main components of the responsibilities of the community coordinator. And again, the community coordinator positions are still intact. And so they continue to work on that function of employment is a moving target. So they continue to work on that function.
Very good, very good. Okay, all right. You have one vacant position also in the misdemeanor probation. Is that
Misdemeanor probation, yes, sir. And so that position was actually, and this is, again, a good example of use of technology. When the budget instructions came out, the director of misdemeanor probation realized that one of her vacant positions could be better utilized, or we could better utilize her existing staff and so her staff were going in the field to do audits at misdemeanor probation providers. And so a lot of those providers their audit results were very good or had very minimal findings. And instead of sending staff out to a location to do an audit, they started to do them through video conferencing. So that eliminated the need for one of those positions to go out in the field and do audits. So that is the one vacancy currently reflected in misdemeanor probation.
Are there any other vacancies in the misdemeanor probation?
No, sir.
Okay. Under the Governor's Office of Transition Support, which we were talking about just a minute ago, going out to the line item 18.3.4, they were we talked about the operational efficiencies with that reentry initiative. That's part of, I'm assuming that's also part of what we were discussing before about eliminating those positions.
Yes, sir.
Okay. The freezing 7 vacant positions at line item 18.3.2 under the Governor's Office of Transition Support and Reentry. Those positions, how long have those positions been? How long have they been open?
Since the beginning of the year.
Okay. And then, in addition to that, so really just January 1st.
Yes.
Fiscal year.
Fiscal year. Okay, so July 1st.
Yes, it's a full 12 months.
Okay.
Recognizing the amended for those positions.
And how many more positions do you have vacant in that particular program?
We have one right now that we're advertising for. I've approved it to fill. And it vacated after the budget instructions were released and we had submitted our recommendations.
Okay. All right. All right. Any questions from any of the members?
I can figure out how to.
Chairman Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'm not quite sure where to start on this because I do have a little bit of knowledge about y'all's agency. And I understand the process. God knows I've been here long enough. And I understand how agencies, when they're told by the executive department to start cutting. And I understand y'all have had to come up with a game plan. But I've got a few major concerns that I want to express.
Yes, sir.
And I don't know that this committee will actually make any changes or restore any funds or move things around, which we certainly have the ability to do. But in the criminal justice system that we have in Georgia, a few years ago we combined probation services and parole supervision. And those are a very vital part of our criminal justice system. Probation, of course, is the sentencing phases that judges give to keep these folks out of prison and occupying those higher-priced incarceration beds. Sometimes successful, a lot of times it hasn't been that successful because people that walk on the other side of the line sometimes have a hard time understanding for whatever the offense they were convicted and sentenced to. The other are the people that have already built time. They've had their postgraduate degrees in criminal activity. Some of them are just glad to be out and are willing to do things, but an awful lot of them aren't. And what we've done in y'all's agency, we've always had stationary buildings, locations for these people to show up for because of the nature of their personalities. And that's to put the pressure on them to be there, to show up, whether it be for drug testing or just so an officer can look them in the eye to see if they see anything. Now, I know that y'all do the best possible job that you can, and these cuts aren't at your own behest, because I've never known an agency that volunteered to cut anything. And y'all have come up with the best proposition, but I got a couple of concerns. One is what this is going to do to the traditional system of supervision, adult supervision. And I presume the documents that y'all have passed out are correct, that Georgia's the highest in the country. We've got 230,000 adults that are under some form of supervision.
Yes, sir.
And we've got, what, 1,500 field officers?
1,500 staff total, about 1,200 sworn.
1,200
Or
sworn?
1,500 sworn, you're right, yes,
Yeah,
sir.
1,500 sworn. So we're expecting these 1,500 sworn officers to be able to handle this without a place. And it's not so much that they need a place to hang their hat, as much as it is a facility that the offenders can come to. Whether it's, and I heard the commissioner, when I first heard of this, I said, well, what are they going to do? They're going to track them to their house, make them pee in a bottle on the side of the road. Well, I hear y'all are doing a different way. You're going to the swabs and stuff like that. That's great. But still, you have some concern. I have some concerns that we're expecting these officers to be on the road and to work out of their cars with a computer or their homes. And I don't know what the situation is by every district. I know in the Northern Judicial Circuit, I think we've got 18 officers in the Northern Judicial Circuit. And my understanding is that we have 9 cars, basically, a car per 2. So how's this going to work? Are they going to be on 12-hour shifts that one runs the car here and the other runs the car the other time? And then the bigger problem that I see is that these offenders, by running a home-based delivery service, is how I look at that. How are we going to expect to keep discipline amongst those folks? And then to send out a sworn officer to go check on an offender at their home. Well, maybe that's going to work, maybe it ain't. But then again, that would, to me, is going to probably do more to put our sworn agents in harm's way, which is a major, major concern to me. Because if they think they're going to have problems, and they might call a deputy, or they may call another law enforcement agency agent to back them up, officer to back them up, I'm not quite sure that they're going to get that. And I've got major concerns about the hazard that's going to put our sworn officers into. And I certainly do appreciate the job y'all have done in the conversion. I think our system is certainly under the criminal justice reform of a few years ago, that it works a lot better than it did, because I was certainly, over the years, had been pushing for this idea, because parole and probation is basically the same thing, with the exception one is that where they've already come out of prison and need to be monitored, and the others were as an alternative to prison. So that being said, those were that's my comments on this. But I think that we are now fixing to move into an area that's going to be a recipe for disaster. And I'm certainly hoping that this committee might consider calling the question on this. You know, it's one thing to do away with travel to conventions. It's something to tone down on meetings or whatever it might be. But whenever we start creating a situation that has a potential of putting our most valuable resources, and those are state employees, in harm's way, then that gives me a great amount of heartburn. And that's, what I just said is only my spin to it and how I see it. But at some point, we're going to be revisiting this situation. And I do appreciate the job y'all do. But I do have these concerns, and I would be remiss if I did not bring them out for this committee to hear that. The number one issue the number one best resources that this state has, and that's its loyal state employees, and even more so the folks that are in the public safety arena, whether it's in this area or in the corrections. But I also understand after almost 30 years that there ain't nothing sexy about putting money in a budget for the criminal justice system. There ain't nothing sexy about it. There ain't no votes there because the general feeling is, well, it's just a necessary problem that we got to deal with. But in the dealing with it, if we're going to move forward to stop recidivism and return these folks to productive society, then we've got to do the job that needs to be done.
I think that's well said, Chairman. I'm concerned, I think we're all concerned, we are concerned. Chairman Nail has said that given the population, the number of cases that you have to work, we talk about cases, these are human beings that we want to be successful, that have paid their time to society, and they are now transitioning out. And the goal here is for them to be successful Georgians for the remainder of their life, and we want that to be the case. And that's where your department is so hugely important in trying to facilitate that. And that's why we were excited about the 14% reduction or increase reduction in the recidivism rate. We were seeing some market changes in that, and that was a programmatic change that was yielding a good return on investment. In addition to that, I'm concerned though, because Commissioner Nail said in his presentation to the full Appropriations Committee last week that we were maintaining probationary sentences for 6 years. And that there were diminishing returns as it pertained to that. And Commissioner Nail has provided studies to show that, which I'm going through. And so I'm equally concerned with what Chairman Powell is saying, but I want to know, and I want you to address the question of at what point are we better off to change state law in a manner that is both safe for the public, administers the final parts of justice as it pertains to these individuals, but also doesn't create an undue burden on our system and reduce the amount of contact and time that each officer is working with a particular case and a particular human being. Because I think what Chairman Powell is saying, part of what he's saying is that face contact, that contact that Commissioner Nail was saying was 10 minutes. For it to be productive, you need 30. And if we're increasing caseload, or we're dragging, or cases are extended for long periods of time, you're reducing the success that those probation officers can have, community supervision officers can have, trying to assist those individuals with their probationary period, making sure they're complying with the terms of the probation, and also working themselves back into society. So those are the concerns we're hearing. And the statutes, the policy, the burden, they're at odds with each other, it appears to me. And so comment on this concept of diminishing returns over time. How would that affect and where would you recommend that we look at the statutes to try to roll back some of those probationary periods? And how would that impact your caseloads and the productivity in terms of the contact that your officers could have with the individuals that you're responsible for?
Yes, sir. Thank you. And there's a lot to kind of unpack there. First of all, I'd like to address the issue of some of the office closures and us closing offices and going to a model of supervising in the community. That model is not new. We have actually, since the 90s when we were given the authority to have our officers be sworn and carry weapons, supervision has been taking place in the field outside of offices. And the virtual office concept started pre-DCS. It started back with parole. And part of the issue was when we would travel around the state and go to offices, supervision takes place in the community. Supervision should take place at people's houses, at their jobs, at their counselors, at their treatment centers. That's where officers should be seeing those under supervision. What we used to do back in, and you'll hear Commissioner Nail refer to fortress probation, is you would have all those offenders, especially if they, whether they were working or not, they would have to take a day off of work, they would report to an office, there'd be a lobby full of people, they would come back and see your officer for maybe a minute to 2 minutes. The officer would go through a series of about 5 or 6 questions about, did you work, are you still working in the same place, still live in the same place, have you used any drugs, have you had contact with law enforcement, see you next month. That's not supervision. Supervision takes place in the community. And so when we would go out and visit offices, what we realized is we'd walk into an office that may have 15 or 20 offices, and there's only 2 or 3 people there because the officers are out in the field where they should be doing their supervision. So we're paying for quite a bit of leased space around the state that we're not utilizing. And then in some instances, we were paying for spaces where we had officers that were working court. They may only have to be in court for 2 sessions during the month, for 2 days or 2 half days. And so those officers are occupying an office that we're paying a lease for the entire month and the entire year, when really the only time they need office space is 2 days out of the month. And so,
But I think we all understand rolling back a physical footprint.